Today I'm going to be presenting on a 28-year-old African-American male who has been admitted to urgent care and hospitalized due to his mother bringing him there because of a decreased need for sleep. He has been awake for 4 consecutive nights in a row, and he has had increasingly erratic and escalating behavior. After a full assessment, I would diagnose him with F31.13 from the DSM-5-TR, bipolar 1 disorder, severe, with mood-congruent psychotic features. Possible differential rule-outs would include F32.3, major depressive disorder with mood-incongruent psychotic features, or F12.159, substance-induced psychotic disorder as evidenced by his use of cannabis. And then he has met criteria for bipolar 1 disorder, severe, with mood-congruent psychotic features, as he has met criteria for a manic episode. He was brought to the hospital for staying awake for 4 consecutive nights as he was working on many different creative projects. And so this surpasses the need for the 1-week criteria, as he had a need to be hospitalized. He meets criteria B for a manic episode, as he has had delusions of grandiosity, believing that he is a prophet to lead artists in a spiritual revolution, and that he is a messenger for a generation that is asleep. He's also had a decreased need for sleep, as mentioned before, staying up for 4 consecutive nights in a row. He also presents with hyperverbal speech and a flight of ideas, jumping between projects and talking rapidly. He's also had an increase in goal-directed behavior, as he has completed a 300-page graphic novel manuscript. He has attempted to register a new business and posted a series of live stream videos claiming to be a prophet. He's also participating in high-risk activities, such as spending money he does not have on design software. And then he meets criteria C for a manic episode, as he has had delusions of being a prophet and a generational messenger. And he's had a need to be hospitalized due to a lack of ability for sleep and not eating. And he also meets criteria D, as substance use would not better explain his symptoms despite his occasional THC use. And then he meets criteria B for bipolar 1 disorder, as his psychotic features, as evidenced by delusions, do not meet criteria for schizophrenia spectrum or other psychotic disorders. They're not better. His symptoms are not better explained by that, as he does not have hallucinations, catatonia, or disorganized speech present within this episode, and they cannot better account for his risky behavior or his decreased need for sleep. In conclusion, he meets the full criteria for bipolar 1 disorder with severe mood-congruent psychotic features. He meets criteria for manic episode, with his symptoms of hyperverbal speech, grandiosity, and decreased need for sleep and risky behaviors. This has resulted in him needing to be hospitalized and would be considered a severe diagnosis. As he has also demonstrated delusions of being a prophet, these will lead to a specifier having mood-congruent psychotic symptoms. The differential diagnoses mentioned before, the major depressive disorder with mood-incongruent psychotic features. He does have a history of major depressive episodes, including hypersomnia and passive suicidal ideation. However, despite the alignment of past episodes and current delusions, his current episode is better supported by a bipolar 1 disorder, as it accounts for the lack of sleep, risky behavior, and erratic behavior. Another differential diagnosis mentioned before was a substance-induced psychotic disorder, F12.159. As evidenced by his reported use of cannabis throughout the 4 nights he has stayed awake and experienced delusions. However, there is not enough evidence to support this, as it does not account for his history of major depressive episodes or symptoms outside of the delusions, such as the hyperverbal speech, risky behaviors, or goal-oriented behaviors. And then important comorbidities to notice between these are the delusions, his substance use, and his past major depressive episode, that all align with many different mental health diagnoses. And then to maintain cultural sensitivity, it's important to take into account his background, and this would include his Southern Baptist context. Southern Baptists, just to be culturally competent, they tend to take the Bible literally, assuming that it is completely correct in its storytelling. There's also a heavy emphasis on spreading the gospel. So this would be important in his delusion of being a prophet to not disrespect his beliefs. He's also mentioned distrust in the healthcare system. However, this cannot just be written off as paranoia, as there has been systemic discrimination against those of African American background in healthcare settings. Another thing to consider is his artistic background as a freelance graphic designer. So there's going to be a line between his unhealthy habits or beliefs about his creativity and his actual motivation and skill he can apply to his future career and to his treatment. However, spending money he doesn't have or writing a 300-page manuscript prolifically instead of sleeping in such a short period of time is more so considered an unhealthy behavior. So that's the line to look at in this situation. It's also important to see his willingness to engage in treatment if it can benefit his creativity. It may be a powerful motivator if he can show stability through taking his medication. However, it may produce less medication compliance as he does not want to dull his creative highs. And according to Kress and Palo 2019, for symptom presentation, it does suggest that African Americans may have a clinical presentation of more manic symptoms. Also, clients with strong religious beliefs may be less likely to adhere to treatment. So it's important to keep this presentation in mind as well. Important ethical considerations from the ACA would be A4A. I would want to avoid harm. So I need to consider the line between building rapport and a safety assessment. Safety assessment should always come first. For A4B, I want to avoid imposing my personal point of view. Him and I may value different things and need to find a middle ground for collaboration to allow for treatment adherence. E5B states that IA should not be disrespecting his values, especially his religious values that may be intertwined with his delusions of being a prophet. Allowing for his beliefs to exist without shutting them down during a reality check can benefit treatment as long as the parts of the delusion and the behaviors around not eating and not sleeping are separated and identified to the client. E13B states whether or not he can consent to be evaluated. If he is in a full-blown episode of psychosis, a psychiatrist on a legal order should evaluate him or give consent to evaluate him. For my own personal values, I have experience with people who have bipolar 1 disorder who are close to me, family and friends. So I have set ideas about what mania or major depression can look like. And this can lead me to believe that Darius has bipolar 1, as this was my first assumption before diving deeper into the criteria. While I still believe this to be the correct diagnosis, I want to be careful that I don't find emotional similarities between the client as I do for close friends and family. He's had different lived experiences and different motivations despite similar manic symptoms. So I want to make sure that I'm also not letting my values of balance and stability interfere with his treatment, as that's a goal that, I think everyone should strive for. However, this might create a disconnect with the client. If he experiences major depressive episodes as well as manic episodes, I need to be more open to understanding what motivates him, because with experiencing both kinds of episodes, he may lean more towards mania than stability. For the I Can Start model, for the individual section, using my person of the therapist, I see that the client presents as confused as to the need for treatment. He feels more clear-headed than ever, in his own words, and his manic state helps him to feel this way. I can empathize with this confusion, as it wouldn't make sense why people who care about you and are supposed to help you don't want you to feel the best you've ever felt, especially when he's had extremely low mood states in the past. And as he is a 28-year-old African-American male who grew up in a Southern Baptist setting, yet is inconsistent with church, his delusions do revolve around religious ideations of being a prophet for a spiritual revolution and a messenger for a new generation. He also works as a freelance graphic designer and values creativity in his current prolific projects, which encompass his creative endeavors. For the assessment, The client should be diagnosed with bipolar 1 disorder, severe with mood-congruent psychotic features, as he meets criteria for mania, and as explained before, with his delusions involving spiritual grandiosity. For the necessary level of care, a short-term inpatient hospitalization to meet his basic needs of sleeping and eating is what he would be referred to. And there's also a referral to psychiatrist for pharmacotherapy. The strengths that he presents with is that he has a good amount of family support. His mother was the one who brought him into the hospital. And the client also describes a willingness to attempt treatment, despite not having had treatment in the past or medication in the past. And this is also fueled by his passion for creativity that gives him purpose in life. And then for treatment, he could be referred to a family-focused therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, and with a psychiatrist or neuropsychiatrist practitioner, pharmacotherapy as well. And then for the aims and interventions for this client, one of them would be to develop coping skills for engaging with emotionally intense stimuli. In the past, he's had a major depressive episode brought on by a job loss and a breakup. So being able to use dialectical behavioral therapy to increase his distress tolerance through skills like TIP and radical acceptance, this can help result in a quicker return to baseline for him. Also, using CBT's activity scheduling could help with him going to church more or spending more time with family as a way to re-engage with his environment despite emotionally intense stimuli. A second treatment goal would be increasing insight into warning signs of mania. For this, using family-focused therapy to develop psychoeducation and positive communication within his support system, such as his family or such as his mother and his sister, would be very important. And then being able to identify the work or social stressor together. And then the third one would be increasing the stabilization of occupational and social functioning, using CBT for cost-benefit analysis and cognitive restructuring for decision-making during a manic depressive episode, so that decisions he makes have more logic behind them, despite the increased or decreased emotional state that he is in. And then for treatment referrals, referring to a psychiatrist and then a spiritual support group or a men's mental health support group could all be very beneficial for him. And then in conclusion, for my overall self-reflection, I feel that I'm very empathetic and lead with genuine curiosity. I do have a tendency to overanalyze, and I feel that it would be more beneficial to the client to focus on their internal process and social context rather than a sole focused on strict diagnosis from the DSM. Using it as a tool for me would be an area of growth rather than as the sole diagnosing manuscript for me. And then being able to align diagnosis with functional treatment to help a client feel aligned with their authentic self and help them feel hopeful would be my goal. In the future, I would want to seek consultation for this specific case in regards to the substance use, as I am unsure about the timeline. And I would want further training in providing safety assessments with clients who are in psychosis and experiencing delusions, just seeing the difference between that and a client who can consent and is within reality. I also want supervision to go over the best way to support a client in hospitalization who isn't eating and who isn't sleeping. So what can I do for them therapeutically if I'm not able to help them physically? And then I would also want to know the best way to help a client manage their symptoms and a transition from a period of inpatient to outpatient to help maintain the progress that they've made within the inpatient setting.